Hey guys, it's Emily and welcome back to my channel. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment. Hey guys, it's Emily. This is going to be my second video on Nintendo Switch. This one is going to be about the different types of controllers you can have on a Nintendo Switch, being Joy-Cons, which you can put into the little Joy-Con grip that's included with your Nintendo Switch when you buy it, or as I got myself last year, a Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, which is, in my opinion, a much superior option, especially if it's just you gaming and you like to use either tabletop mode or pop your Nintendo Switch in the dock and then play by yourself. This is definitely much more comfier for longer gaming sessions. Whereas these little Joy-Cons, they're really good for when you have people around, because you can give these two Joy-Cons off to someone else and you've still got your own Nintendo Switch Pro Controller. Or if you have 3 people and you've got games that support single Joy-Cons, you've already got 2 Joy-Cons, one for each of your friends, plus your own Pro Controller. Of course you're not going to give that to someone else. It's always your own. Okay, so you've just bought yourself a brand new shiny Nintendo Switch. You've opened it up and you've discovered that the Nintendo Switch Joy-Cons are actually much smaller than you first expected, which seems a little bit weird, but these controllers are absolutely tiny and they do look like they're made for ants. But you know that Nintendo's been making a Pro Controller which is around £60, depending on where you get it from. So the question is it worth buying one of these or sticking with the original Joy-Cons that come on your Nintendo Switch and just adding them into your Nintendo Switch Joy-Con grip? Well, let's take a look at all the different ways that you can play your Switch games and which ways are best. There are 3 basic methods aside from using them in handheld mode, which is just like this, so Nintendo Switch, and then both of your Joy-Cons just attached at the side of the tablet. So the first one is you can use a pair of Joy-Cons, so both Joy-Cons like this is a pair, so one left, one right, or you can use one in each hand like this. So you've got all your buttons, SL, SR, A, B, X and Y, and then obviously your thumb controller, and obviously it's slightly different on the other controller. You can put them both together to make one controller, which is using the Nintendo Switch grip. This is supposed to be a little bit more like using a real controller, a bit more like a Xbox controller or a PlayStation controller, or more like the Pro Controller here, which I have. It's not exactly the same. As you can see, it's quite square and it's not the comfiest. It's kind of not very grippy on the back. It's more shiny plastic material, kind of feels like a bit like a cheap plastic material, so it's not very good for long periods of time. Your hands are in a slightly better position than if you're just holding the one Joy-Con, but it's still not optimal. Definitely much better with the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller. Joy-Cons. Joy-Cons are special because you can detach them. They can act as 2 separate controllers in a multiplayer game for games like Super Smash Bros. Ultimate or Mario Kart 8, ARMS. This makes them fantastic options for when you're hosting different games nights, or if you just want to have a lot of family and friends playing together. Whereas if you prefer playing alone and you want to have a more comfortable controller for when you're playing games like Super Smash Ultimate or Splatoon, you can use the Pro Controller, as it's more comfortable in your hands, but it also feels way more familiar and similar to other gaming controllers out there from the big brands like Xbox, PlayStation. It just depends what you feel suits best for you. There is not just one that fits all, which is why they've brought out the Pro Controller, Joy-Cons, different colours of Joy-Cons, different styles of Pro Controllers. Let's get into some of the stats, or some of the stats surrounding the Joy-Cons and the Pro Controllers. Joy-Cons are normally around £70 in the UK, whereas the Pro Controller is £60 in the UK. You get 2 Joy-Cons for £70, or you get 1 Pro Controller. The battery hours on the Joy-Cons are up to 6 hours, whereas a Pro Controller is up to 40 hours. The weight of Joy-Con is 3.52 ounces, whereas a Pro Controller is 14.1 ounce. So the Joy-Cons are going to feel like a feather compare a Pro Controller. The size of the Joy-Con is a negative for serious gamers, as Joy-Con is designed around a child's hand. They are a much better option for children over adults like me. Joy-Cons particularly weigh just because a Joy-Con is better value because you get 2 doesn't mean they're always the better controllers. The Nintendo Switch Pro Controller is unmatched when it comes to design. It's a quality controller that has a weight we love and and it's comfortable and well needed for long sessions, and the button design is perfect for the much better performance that you get out of the Pro Controller, which is why you pay that bit extra for 1 well-designed controller compared to 2 small and tiny. They are well designed, the Joy-Cons, but they're tiny and they're not suitable for a long gaming session. My final thoughts on the Pro Controller and the Joy-Cons is that you can always get multiple Pro Controllers and Joy-Cons, because you can have up to 8 at one time, but that's up to you. My final thoughts is that my final thoughts on the Pro Controller and the Joy-Cons is that it's worth having the Pro Controller and the Joy-Cons, as you can use your Pro Controller because that's more comfortable to you and you're going to be using it a heck of a lot more than your guests, as your guests are only going to be there for a couple of hours, say, so they can use the Joy-Cons. But after taking it all into consideration, the Pro Controller is mainly there for single use, like own personal use only. This is why you have a more comfortable Pro Controller for normal usage, and the 2 Joy-Cons that come with it for anyone that's just tagging along with your game or hanging out with you for that day. The Joy-Cons aren't really made for a full 4 or 5 hour gaming session. I forgot to mention earlier that you can use the Nintendo Switch controllers as a pair, just one in each hand, which is slightly more comfortable than putting them in the grip which is provided. Definitely more comfortable. I mean, if you ever used the Nintendo Wii, you'd know that having 2 Wii remotes, one in each hand, this feels rather similar because you have got 2 Joy-Cons, one in each hand, and obviously it's more comfortable, easier to use, as you don't have a cable running between these two, as they are wireless. So there's no cable anymore, so you can do whatever you want with your hands, for example. But it can be rather, like, I do realise it can be annoying having one in each hand or both hands all the time while you're gaming, but this is where you can just leave them at the side and play. Skip. If you do have larger hands, you can put your 2 Nintendo Switch controllers inside the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con grip, which comes with the original Nintendo Switch, not the Lite, obviously, because the Joy-Cons don't attach. But this does make it slightly easier for people with larger hands. Like, my hands aren't the largest, they're rather small, really. So this doesn't make much difference for me. It's just as comfortable as holding 2 Joy-Cons, or one at a time. The other option, straight out the box, is to put these into the Nintendo Switch grip, which personally I think isn't the best way. It's supposed to be closer to the traditional controller, which is more accurate, but it's basically getting the worst aspects of the Joy-Cons, but none of the benefits of any of the Joy-Cons, which is a bit weird and it doesn't really make sense. The grips, they're very, very tiny. They're not grippy at all. Like, the back, as I said earlier, is kind of like a cheap plastic. It's shiny. It doesn't allow you to actually grip. Like, if you're going to be gaming for a long period of time and you get sweaty hands, like, this is not the way forward you want to be going with. Like, it's really shiny, not grippy at all. There's no grip. It's just pure plastic, the grip that comes with it, compared to the Nintendo Switch controller, which I don't know if you can see, but it's got a little different pattern for where your hands go here, so it's got more grip to it, and then the base and the top are a different type of plastic, more like the controller grip here. So definitely have more grip holding onto this, and you'll be able to game easier and for longer periods of time. We're definitely much better. I found myself in some games where, for instance, let's say you have to hit a B to jump and a Y to attack, that I'll accidentally hit the X and the Y together, which is kind of a big problem for most gamers, because you don't want to be hitting 2 buttons at the same time when you only want to be hitting 1. This is mainly because the Joy-Cons of the Nintendo Switch are so small, and there's barely any space between any of the buttons, that you end up hitting 2 in one go, which isn't ideal. Now, the really interesting thing about this is not a lot of people notice that the left and the right Joy-Con don't actually have the same spacing. So, for instance, the left or the right, depending on which way around you use it, are actually designed differently. But that's so you can figure out which feels a little more comfortable in your hands. That doesn't make sense. Now, this is really surprising to me, because I've only just figured this out by actually looking at the Joy-Con and reading a few reviews. But I don't know if you guys have noticed it, but the left and the right Joy-Cons don't actually have the same spacing. So the left and the right Joy-Cons, I don't know if you've seen them up close, there isn't actually the same spacing on all the buttons and the placement on the right and the left. So the stick is further to the left or the right depending on which one you use, and it's designed so that you can figure out which one feels more comfortable and more practical for your hands. For me, I personally prefer the left hand one, because when you hold it that way around, my dominant hand is my right. So all the buttons, like the D-pad and for jump, are on my right hand, which is my hand that I use more predominantly. So if it's a jumping game, I can hit that way faster. As my left, I normally use for a thumbstick, which is why I prefer the left, because it's the correct way around when you're holding it. When you're holding just one Joy-Con. Now, to bear that in mind, there is something I brought. Now, to bear that in mind, depending on which one you prefer, there is something you can try out or buy, and it's a little third-party accessory which acts a little bit like a handle for each Joy-Con. It's a steering wheel, and you put the Joy-Con in the middle, and then you can hold it like that. And there's a little fold in the middle where you just place the Joy-Con inside, and they're shaped especially for the left and the right. So all the buttons, including the shorter ones, work really well in that grip, the third-party grip. It actually makes it feel a little more like a controller. It's not going to beat some of the other controllers out there, bearing in mind, but I'll link to it down below. I found it and it works rather well. I just don't have it with me. It works rather well, but it's not going to live up to some of the other controllers that are out there, especially some of the bigger known third-party controllers that Nintendo Switch are starting to get in. The Joy-Cons on the Nintendo Switch are really versatile, but how do all the options of using a Joy-Con, from using one Joy-Con to two Joy-Cons, using a Joy-Con grip, a Joy-Con steering wheel, actually stack up against using an actual traditional controller, like the Pro Controller? Well, honestly, they don't. This Pro Controller is a much better option, personally. The Nintendo Switch Pro Controller is an evolutional... The Nintendo Switch Pro Controller is evolutional of what Nintendo have been trying to do since the Wii U Pro Controller. So if any of you bought the Wii U, you know that they released a Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, which is basically just an Xbox 360 controller, but they decided to try something slightly different with it. And the Switch buttons and the Switch sticks were obviously added onto that controller. But honestly, it didn't really feel all that great. But with the new Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, you'll see that they're using the exactly same setup overall, but it's just designed slightly differently, so it feels much better in your hands. It feels a lot better now, to be honest. Now, there is an exception to this, and that's the fact that when it comes to really intensive gaming, I do prefer the Nintendo Switch Pro Controller for sure. But if I'm doing anything that's a much slower paced game, or if it's turn-based, or if it's a really easy game that I don't have to be super focused on, I actually end up just using the Joy-Cons attached to the Nintendo Switch, or using the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con grip, as that's just a much easier lay back and relax type feeling of controller when you're just laying back and relaxing and using them. Whereas using the Pro Controller like this, I feel like it's more dedicated to gaming modes that are more fun, more fast paced, shooter game type games. It's just the way it feels in your hands is just, there's different times that you'd use the Joy-Cons compared to a Pro Controller. So, getting back to my original question, should you rush out and buy a Pro Controller right away? Not really. They're pretty cool. They're worth having, especially if you want to upgrade your Joy-Cons at some point. But it's not the kind of thing that you need. It's not a necessary. It's not the type of thing that you need. It's not kind of thing that's a necessity. It's a luxury. In all honesty, 60 quid for one controller for one person compared to 70 for 2 Joy-Cons. So that's essentially 2 more people you could have playing on your Switch. Whereas if you buy a Pro controller, that's 1 player versus 2, and it's a £10 difference between the 2, but it's up to you. The Joy-Cons are comfortable and they do get the job done, and they come in a wide range of pretty colours, from blue, purple, yellow, green, pink, or to traditional grey controllers, which comes on the base Nintendo Switch, along with the neon blue and red controllers, which come on one of the base Switches as well. Or you can get a variety, or you can get a selection of different Pro controllers. I have seen a Smash Pro controller, which is pretty much the same as the original Pro controller that I have here, with a few different Smash designs. It's nothing special. You can get a Splatoon version, and I do believe there's another version of the Pro controller. I just don't know what it is. If I find it, I will put link to it down below. Hey fellow gamers, it's Emily. I'm back today with another video about Nintendo Joy-Cons versus the Pro controller. Which one should you buy? Is it worth buying the Pro controller, or is it worth buying extra Joy-Cons or attachments and accessories from third parties for your Joy-Cons? Let's get into the video. Okay guys, I'm going to end the video there. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment. And be sure to check out the channel for another video. See you guys soon. Bye. See you guys soon. Bye.